Propaganda and Power: How the DA and AfriForum Manipulate South Africa's Narrative. South Africa, a country built on struggle, freedom, and now storytelling warfare. Every day, millions of us scroll through our feeds thinking we're seeing the news. But what if I told you that half of it, the outrage, the fear, the pride, is engineered? Engineered by politicians and organizations who understand one thing better than anyone else: if you can control the story, you can control the nation. Today, we're unpacking how two powerful forces, the Democratic Alliance and AfriForum, are reshaping South Africa's reality, not through bullets or ballots, but through propaganda. This is not your typical political debate. This is psychological warfare, South African style. What propaganda really is. Let's be clear. Propaganda doesn't mean fake news. It means strategic storytelling. It's the selective use of truth. It's emotion over evidence. It's the art of making you feel something first and think later. Every flag raised, every hashtag pushed, every breaking news headline, someone's agenda is behind it. And in South Africa's deeply divided society, that kind of emotional manipulation is like petrol on a fire. The DA and AfriForum don't just use propaganda, they depend on it. It's what fuels their political power, their donations, their image, their survival. Let's start with the Democratic Alliance, the official opposition. They call themselves the Party of Good Governance, the voice of accountability. And to be fair, compared to the ANC's scandals, that message sounds believable. But the DA has mastered the art of political marketing, and that's where the propaganda begins. The clean image myth. The DA's strongest weapon isn't its policies, it's its image. You've seen the visuals: clean streets, smiling workers, happy communities. The slogan: where the DA governs, things work. It's repeated over and over like a chant. And after a while, it starts to sound like truth, even if the reality on the ground isn't that simple. Yes, Cape Town looks cleaner than many other cities, but behind that image are entire communities, like those in the Cape Flats, still trapped in poverty and violence. You'll never see those faces on the DA's posters. Because propaganda isn't about showing the whole truth, it's about controlling which truth gets told. Fear as a tool. Now let's talk fear. The DA knows that fear moves votes. That's why election slogans like "Stop the ANC before it's too late" or "The ANC is killing jobs" exist. Those are not policy statements, they're psychological triggers. They make people feel that the country is collapsing and that only the DA can save it. And the more fear spreads, the more the DA's narrative feels like security. The race card in reverse. Then there's the racial subtext. The DA publicly says it's a non-racial party, but listen closely and you'll hear whispers of racial anxiety in their messaging. When they talk about corruption, inefficiency, or crime, the subtext is often this: this is what happens under black leadership. They never say it outright, that's the genius. It's coded language, tailored to reassure white and middle-class voters who fear losing control in a changing country. Propaganda doesn't have to shout, sometimes it just has to remind. Now let's shift gears, because AfriForum takes propaganda to another level. Unlike the DA, AfriForum isn't chasing votes, they're chasing influence. They're fighting a cultural war, one where emotion, not evidence, wins. The victimhood narrative. AfriForum's entire identity is built on one story: that white South Africans, especially Afrikaners, are under siege. They talk about farm murders as if they're part of an organized racial genocide. Now, farm murders are real and they're horrific. But the way AfriForum frames them isn't about facts, it's about fear. They use music, imagery, slow-motion footage, crying families, everything designed to make you feel like there's a war against white people. And once that emotional hook is in, facts don't matter anymore. Even when data shows that the majority of violent crime victims are not white, the propaganda still wins. Because fear always beats logic. Mastering the media. AfriForum has also mastered social media like few organizations in South Africa. They figured out that rage spreads faster than reason. So they post short, punchy videos, bold graphics, dramatic slogans, the kind that go viral instantly. They know exactly how to trigger online outrage. And that outrage doesn't just stay online. It translates into funding, international sympathy, and political leverage. AfriForum leaders even tour Europe and the US, presenting themselves as victims of reverse racism. It's a global PR campaign disguised as activism. And the result? They control the international narrative. They turn South Africa's complexities into a simple emotional story. We are under attack. Reframing the debate. AfriForum also has a gift for reframing national debates. When the government talks about land reform, AfriForum says, they're coming for your farms. When universities push transformation, AfriForum says, they're destroying Afrikaans culture. When Black South Africans demand justice, AfriForum says, they're trying to erase us. It's not about accuracy, it's about control. Control over how people interpret events. Control over who's the victim and who's the villain. Comparing the two. So let's compare these two propaganda powerhouses side by side. The DA sells competence, AfriForum sells fear. But both sell control. The DA's message says, trust us, we'll fix the chaos. AfriForum's message says, fear them, they're coming for you. One plays to middle-class anxiety, the other plays to cultural survival. Both rely on selective truth-telling, using real issues but twisting the emotional frame. And here's the most dangerous part. Their propaganda doesn't just shape opinions, it shapes identities. If you're a DA supporter, you start to see yourself as the rational one in a sea of corruption. If you're an AfriForum supporter, you see yourself as the persecuted defender of civilization. And suddenly, you're not just disagreeing with other South Africans, you're opposing them. That's how propaganda wins. Not by changing policies, but by changing people. The psychological game. See, both groups have learned something powerful. In modern politics, you don't need to control the media, you just need to control emotion. Emotion decides what we share, what we believe, what we fight for. And once a political group owns your emotions, they own your perception of reality. That's why propaganda is so dangerous. It doesn't silence people, it divides them. It doesn't erase truth, it drowns it in noise. The DA's propaganda makes people believe the country can only be saved by technocratic governance. AfriForum's propaganda makes people believe they're living through racial persecution. And both feed the same cycle: fear, anger, division. While they argue over who's right, inequality deepens, corruption continues, and ordinary South Africans keep suffering. So what's the lesson here? Propaganda doesn't always look like dictatorship posters or fake headlines. Sometimes it's a well-produced campaign ad. Sometimes it's a tweet. Sometimes it's a speech that sounds like truth because it tells you what you want to hear. The DA and AfriForum are masters of that craft. They understand that in a world of emotional overload, the loudest story wins, not the truest one. But here's the real question. If we all start believing only the stories that flatter us, that comfort us, or that confirm our fears, who's really in control? It's not the politicians, it's not the parties, it's the propaganda itself. So next time you scroll through your feed or see a political ad that makes you feel angry, afraid, or superior, take a second. Ask yourself, why does someone want me to feel this way? Because that's how propaganda works. Not by lying to you, but by making you feel too much to question anything at all. This has been Propaganda and Power: How the DA and AfriForum Manipulate South Africa's Narrative. Like, share it, and subscribe for more deep dives.